Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast, Living Authentically, Becoming Your True Self, the podcast where we explore what it really means to live, speak, and lead from a place of truth and kindness. I'm your host, as ever, Sue Whitaker. I'm a life transitions and identity coach, and I guide individuals through significant life changes, helping them to rediscover their true selves and embrace new beginnings with confidence and clarity. Today's episode is all about psychological identity. And what I mean by that is we're going to touch on some areas like self esteem, resilience, coping mechanisms, and some areas of mental and emotional health. To help me explore this topic a little bit more, I have a great guest speaker for you, Kate Howell, who left her corporate career and, like me, trained as an alternative therapist to actually help. And she's a clinical hypnotherapist here with me today. So, hello, Kate. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Sue. It's a tricky surname. It's actually Hoyle, Kate Hoyle.
Hoyle.
That's fine. I get all sorts of pronunciations, so that's absolutely
I,
fine.
lo- I love that I love that we've corrected each other on that because I absolutely would want to. So Kate Hoyle, brilliant. Okay, no worries at all. So yeah, thanks for being here with me today.
Oh, it's
Um,
a
I
pleasure.
I really appreciate it. And I guess one of the things that I really wanted to have a chat with you about, because I was quite curious to hear your story, was how it kind of started for you. So, how did you go from corporate to kind of where you are now? So, are you okay to sort of share your story with us?
Yes, of course. And it's something I never expected. I'd had a long
Yeah,
and varied corporate career. And then, very sadly, my daughter was diagnosed with clinical anxiety and depression when she was only 12.
yeah,
And
that's
that
quite
led
scary.
very
Mm.
scary. And it led us on years of therapy and CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. And the poor thing, if anything I was recommended, any form of holistic therapy, any form of therapy, I would take her off. We tried everything. And then I heard about this particular therapy that I use, hypnotherapy called RTT. And I liked the sound of it because it was very results driven.
Mm.
Because she would say to me, well, Mum, I've had someone to talk to, but it hasn't changed anything. Anyway, I found someone to work with her, and it was the only thing that really helped. And I was so blown away by the results, having seen so many attempts and so many things that didn't work, that I dropped everything, I retrained, and I've been doing it ever since and absolutely love it.
That sounds brilliant. That sounds really good. So for those of us who aren't familiar with the acronym RTT, can you go into a little bit more detail about what that means and what? Because obviously, I don't know anything other than one type of hypnotherapy, and I don't know if any of our listeners will. But I remember seeing, oh, who is that? The really famous one.
Paul McKenna?
That's the one who basically just like goes sleep and then like makes them walk around like chickens or whatever and things like that. And obviously there's some controversy around that, I'm sure, from some people, but that's the one that I think of when I think hypnotherapist, and I think a lot of people would, right? So yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about RTT and maybe just hypnotherapy for us who have no experience whatsoever?
I know this is something I come up against all the time.
I bet
People
you do.
think that I'm going to make them wandering around, clucking like chickens. And there's stage hypnosis, and
Yes.
that's not what this is. So that's
Yes.
something very separate. And in fact, they're very quick and clever about working out who they're going to put on stage. Um, and then there's really another two forms of hypnotherapy, which very unhelpfully are just called hypnotherapy. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you have one type where someone will take you into hypnosis, which is just a relaxed state, and they will put in what we call good suggestion. Like,
Yeah.
you're calm and you're confident and whatever it is, the positive things that you need to hear. The hypnotherapy I do is rapid transformational therapy, which pretty much does what it says on the tin. It was devised by Marissa Peer. And what I think is the fundamental real asset of that is that it's all about going back to the root cause. Where did this problem come from? Because if you don't do that, to me, it's a bit like a doctor giving you a tablet for a symptom, but they never really figure out what's wrong with you because they didn't sort out what made you sick in the first place.
Yeah.
So I always think you have to go upstream. You have to find out where this comes from. So the beauty of hypnosis is it allows you to access the subconscious. So sometimes clients will go back to known memories, but it will be a lot more vivid. Sometimes they'll go back to something and they'll say, like, I'd completely forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Or they didn't realize the relevance. And what happens is we go back to a few scenes, some mostly three, and you weave it together and you see what the theme is.
Yeah.
And then the client can go, oh, now I get it. That's why I do that. That's why I think like that. That's why I behave like that. And once you've got that understanding, that's when you can truly unravel it. Because rather than putting something at bay for a while, you
Mm.
don't want the cause to still be there. So therefore, the thoughts and the behavior don't need to be there.
And that's really it. That's really fascinating to me. I definitely appreciate you educating me on this, because I think, from a coach perspective, from my sort of perspective, a lot of the clients I have are normally, adults, older, more mature, etc. And they normally have life experiences. So they have that little bit more of a depth of life experience and their own identity, so that you can take them further back and they kind of can understand for themselves what they're seeing. Because I agree with you, it's the same sort of solution, but different ways of doing it. So I take them back to what they've seen before or what they
Yeah.
felt before, and it might be a traumatic experience, it
Hmm.
might be a troubled childhood, it might be anything like that. But it's still about letting that kind of, I call it the mask slip. And it's weird, isn't it? Because I'm using my hand, but I know nobody can see me, but I'm putting my hand across my face and saying the mask that slips. Because as we grow older, we all have different masks, don't we? In terms
Oh,
of
for
how
sure.
we in different worlds. So what I tend to do is I tend to focus on some of my things, like equine, interactions and things like that, just to get people to drop the mask. Because when they're in a situation they've never been in before, their childlike identity starts to come out, their curiosity, their wonder, for any person of any age. And that's what I really like about those sorts of interactions. And again, it's so strange because we're coming at it from the same reaction, the same kind of intention to how to help, but just in very different ways. And I
Yes,
find that
indeed. Yeah.
fascinating.
Yes.
So do you think that that's why RTT works well with younger humans, children, etc., because it allows them to step back without having to have such broad life experiences? Or is it
Yes.
another reason, do you think?
I
What
think
do you...
there's two reasons. One is because if you ask the child what's wrong, they'll usually say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you ask them, where do you think this comes from? I don't know. Which is why they often talking therapy is very difficult, because it's the logical brain and it's a question that they don't know the answer to. But their subconscious does know the answer, because it doesn't matter what age we are, your subconscious has stored every single experience you've
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
And so they still can go back to previous experiences, but not logically. So it allows them to find the answer for themselves. There's also a brilliant technique in the therapy where you can really tease out what's something trying to do for them. Because this is a really strange, you're going to love this, Sue. This is a strange concept, but
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
if you have something that you don't like, your
Yeah.
brain thinks it's doing you a service. Otherwise, it wouldn't do it. So let's take anxiety. Anxiety feels really crippling and it descends from nowhere and you can't do anything about it. You can unravel that. And once you understand, actually, anxiety is trying to help you. Anxiety's job is to stop you entering a situation that you found difficult in the past, that's had some real emotional impact on you. And children really, because the other thing that I was going to mention that they're so good at is their imagination.
Mm.
And so they really will go along. So an adult, you try to explain that process, and they'll go, really? But, and I say, no, just go with it. You know, you'll see as we go along.
Yeah,
But a
yeah.
child will just jump straight in there. And once they understand that it was actually trying to help them, but they don't need that help anymore. They don't want that help anymore. In fact, it's tipped into causing them a problem because they
Mm,
do want to do these things.
mm,
we it no longer has a role, and once something no longer has a role, it can go, and it's just really powerful. And and I work with a lot of neurodivergent people, and it doesn't worry me. There's no one way of doing anything. I've had children wandering about the room and talking about a
mm,
picture, and
mm,
it doesn't matter as long as you've got someone into that really relaxed, like you said, you get them into a
mm,
relaxed state where they can really tap in.
mm.
They don't, not so worried about external influences and what's going on. That's where you can get the results.
And it's really interesting as well that you talk about, as I say, one of my other favorite topics, which is neurodivergence, because again, I we've definitely seen an increase, haven't we,
Yes.
of people being diagnosed, both children and adult. And we all and when I talk about this with other people, I always say that one of the reasons why dyslexia is the most common type of neurodivergence is because it's been around longer. Basically, as far as I can tell, that's
Exactly.
really the only thing that it's been around longer than ADHD or autism or ASD or however you want to call it. I could talk a whole podcast, I think, myself just about neurodivergent, but I'll try and keep it back on track. But I think you're right. When adults are diagnosed, and again, I've got clients who are late diagnosis,
Yeah.
or they don't even have a diagnosis, but they already have that self-awareness and that life experience because they've tried things and it's failed, or they've tried things and it's not gone the way they want, or they've had success. So working with them in that respect is a little bit easier. Not necessarily if they're not prepared to focus on what matters, but
Mhm.
they do have that little bit more self-awareness than younger adults or younger or children, because they've seen it in action when they're oversharing or something has caused an issue, or they've burnt themselves in the past with their life experiences. So again, it's very interesting that you talk about the neurodivergent side of it, because as you say, children will just say, I don't know. It's like
Yeah.
when they say, I don't know why I don't like it.
Yeah.
The food analogy you gave was
Mm.
brilliant. I don't know why I don't like it. Well, yeah, they probably don't know why they don't like it.
Mm.
Whereas when you're older, and again, we spoke a little bit about this before, but menopause, women
Mm.
in perimenopause and menopause, their taste buds change. So
Mm.
I'm suddenly finding out that there are certain things that suddenly are tasting a little bit different right now. And I'm going, well, but but there isn't actually a justification why I don't like it, because I normally have that knowledge that says I like it. But equally, if I try something and find out I like it now, I can probably relate it to my hormones, or relate to, there's a logical reason. But children and younger adults just don't have that life experience to be able to say this is why I don't like it. They're going through life literally for the first few years. It's the first time, isn't it? So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And they don't have the perspective that adults have.
That's a really good way of saying it.
But I mean,
Definitely.
just touching on neurodivergence, it doesn't matter what age I'm working with. If I have a neurodivergent individual in front of me and we are going back to previous experiences, one of the most common is I've just started nursery, because that's the first exposure to lots of different children. And everyone else knows what to do and I don't. And everyone else is like everyone else has been given the rule book and no one's told me. And that's a very similar, and that's the first seed of, hang on a minute, I'm different. And the really heartbreaking thing is that they then go through school. It's not just I'm different, is I'm not as good as.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to unravel. It doesn't matter what the age is.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. I feel so, that resonates with me so much, because when I started school, I felt like everybody else had either had a vaccine of something, or literally a lesson or something, or
Mm,
a plan that they've been given, that nothing had been shared with me.
mm,
And I felt very out of my depth, particularly because, as you say, once you start to get around other people, that's when it starts to really show, doesn't it? It's really evident of different cognitive thinking. And
yes.
I'm trying to talk about it like that because one thing, as you say, I'm very passionate about is people thinking that they're wrong just because they're not either typical, or
Mm,
that they have a different way of processing things,
mm.
because they're not wrong. They're
Exactly.
just they're just different, and
Yeah.
and different. We as human beings, I don't think are good at, we're good at sort of thinking that difference or change is good, right? Because people don't like change, they don't like being unfamiliar, uncertainty, ambiguity, etc. However, um, when people are different, it's just something that you have to, be aware of and get used to. And that's why I like what I do, because I like the self-awareness piece. Um, and a lot of the people that I interact with as clients are actually self-aware. They
Mm.
just don't know the next piece of how to help themselves.
Yes. And often you need someone to work with you on that because it's very difficult to do that self reflection yourself.
Mm,
So I'm sure it's similar for you, but for me, you can't ask yourself a question with your logical brain that you need your subconscious brain to answer. So that's why you often need somebody else to bounce it off. And a lot of what both of us do is about changing that perspective and
yeah.
seeing something in a different way.
And that's really interesting that we talk about that, and that's why I love engaging with people like yourself in our field, because we all have our different methodologies, but ultimately people can get different things from different people and working, and some people will want to work with things, because again, a common myth, isn't it, is that you only come to us when there's a problem, but actually sometimes people just want to go deeper, you
Mm.
know um, but I would imagine with the younger adults or children, one of the things that you have is that obviously you've got that parent relationship with the child as well, because the parents are clearly probably worried or seeing something that they shouldn't see. Is that kind of what you've seen in the past?
Oh, definitely. And when you're working with children and young adults, you've actually got two clients because you've got the child and the parent. Um, and I think children like the hope story from my daughter, and the parents like the fact that I understand where they're at and what they're experiencing. Because
Mm,
I remember when I was at that stage and I felt completely alone,
mm,
lost, helpless. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And that's why I would always jump on a call with anyone going through that, just so they realize that they're not alone and they're not the only one,
yeah,
and that there are things that can help. Um, and yeah, I think it does really help that I've got the lived experience as well. And same as with my, senior corporate clients, I've got a corporate background. So it's all about being able to talk someone's language, isn't it? And
yeah.
understand their experiences and what they're going through. I think really helps when you're doing any of this sort of work.
Definitely. And I think that the interesting part with corporate clients is, again, is there's always that little bit of ego, isn't there? And I would imagine it's similar with parents as well. Is that I need to be seen that I'm doing a good job, or I need to be seen that I'm succeeding. in my professional career or in my as a parent or whatever, and things like that. And people are very judgmental. If their child isn't doing well, it's seen as a reflection on their parenting abilities. And unfortunately, there are things like what we're talking about today, that it wouldn't matter what your parenting style is like if they've had a traumatic experience, unless you're going to wrap them up in cotton wool and never let them experience anything. Unfortunately, it's just a consequence of living, isn't it? So
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's always, you take it as a reflection, definitely. I mean, I did, because my daughter, it was quite late when we came to hypnotherapy, and she had very poor school attendance, and it was really hard to take that decision that education had to take a back seat, and because you're just absolutely judged by that. um, and that can be very difficult, and it's, how is your child doing and what stage are they at? And just to pick up on something you said, in fact, it doesn't even have to be something traumatic. We actually only need 3 negative experiences around the same thing to form a negative belief.
wow, really, that just that little?
That's all it takes. And so I deal with people that sometimes it's very big, severe trauma, and other times it's just repeated events that have caused a belief about who they are or what's going on in their world. And it's really important for parents to know and to have that reassurance that they're doing the best they can with all their previous experiences and beliefs. And it's very interesting with adult clients. They often don't want to be critical of parents. And I have to reassure them that this work is nothing to do with judgment. I'm really not interested in pursuing were they sort of good parents, bad parents. They were doing the best they could in those circumstances. What I'm interested in is what's the impact it had on you. And parents can be, for example, parents can be thinking they're doing the best in that they're taking their children to all sorts of activities, and they're tutoring them and putting everything into their education. But for some children, that's not actually the answer, and that's not what they need at that time. So we all do things with the best intentions. It doesn't mean that that's the way they land.
Yeah, and again, I'm it's amazing you're talking, and I've got lots of different thoughts going on. I think we could talk about this for literally for a whole series myself. But what you talked about in terms of negative experiences, I mean, I would say, and again, I'm quite open about it, my mum had narcissistic traits, multi-generational trauma, and it seemed to have extended from my grandfather, which I only really got confirmation of by talking to my adult aunts and uncles, because my
Mm,
mum is one of three, later in life, so I wasn't sure, but I've suddenly started to have some things very, very recently that's come up. And I've gone, okay, so he was troubled. That was then learnt by my mum. And
mm,
then the way she parented me was effectively put me in cotton wool, wrap me up, let me never have any experiences. So when I did start having experiences as going to university, etc., I felt emotionally or psychologically much younger,
mm.
because I didn't know these sorts of experiences, and they were scary, but I also felt like I had to learn them, you know. Um, and when I work with people and horses, because again, one of the things I love about my horses is they're really, really intuitive.
Mm,
They're really intuitive in the human emotion, and they help me to read a client much better, and much quicker than what I could do in having a few virtual sessions. So a lot of the time, if I can get a client down there to look, they'll give me a lot of information just by how they're interacting in a non-verbal way. But again, a lot of people would say to me, I'm scared of horses. And then, as you say, they revert to either one instance as a kid, but again, it may have been multiple small things, like they went to visit a farm or whatever, and one of the horses, tried to have a carrot that they had in their hand or something, or whatever, or something very small. Or it could be something equally as traumatic as falling off the horse and having a back injury, which is
Mm.
actually what happened to me. And it took me a while to sort of literally get back on the horse, which I have done. Um, but people share those kind of interactions with me, and it gives me, as you say, a bit of a mindset or a reframe as to what their limiting beliefs are, because people definitely have lots of limiting beliefs, and that's actually one of my episodes, again, where I talk about it myself, of sort of those sorts of things. So so talking about sort of helping younger adults, teenagers with anxiety, etc. One of the things that cropped up as well is the low self-esteem. Um, how how does that link into sort of what you do and how you sort of work with children
Yeah,
and
and it's
younger
not,
adults?
it's really not just children. It's
Mm,
that's absolutely any age. And I fundamentally, after all these years, I've come to, you know, recognize that self-esteem is the foundation to everything.
mm,
Because self-esteem is very different from confidence. How I think of it is that confidence is what we show the outside world,
yeah.
and we can fake that all the time. So I have some very successful people I've worked with who said, Kate, people would be amazed that I'm sitting here talking to you about self-esteem because I'm, successful and they think I'm really confident and I can do this and that. But self-esteem is how we fundamentally feel about ourselves from the inside.
Mm,
And that can carry through life. And unfortunately, the child that doesn't have good self-esteem becomes the adult that doesn't have good self-esteem, because these experiences don't necessarily have a timestamp. So
mm,
we grow up, but the emotional belief and experience doesn't grow up. So often you'll find an adult. So I can work with adults who go, I just have these angry outbursts and I don't know where they're coming from, and it's not me and I don't want to be like it. And it's the child. It's the
mm,
child's response. That's why it's
mm,
coming out like that, because that hasn't been dealt with as the child. So the self-esteem work is, if I could do that for everybody, if I could go into
yeah.
schools and do that for everybody, because once you feel secure within yourself, it opens up everything else. But again, it's about going back and finding out, what were those experiences? What were those experiences that made you feel that you weren't good enough?
Mm,
And
mm,
then changing them. And the great thing you can do at any stage is the child has no option. The options are very limited. Yeah, I'm different. Oh, that means I'm not as good as.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not very safe, and there's nothing I can do. I can't leave this environment.
Yeah.
Um, I don't get any praise unless I achieve something. All these things form the beliefs form the behaviors. You get the perfectionist, the people pleaser, the hypervigilant person. Um, and they all come out in different ways. But if you go back and find out, where did this start? What's this come from? Then we can unravel it. And then we can put in the good suggestion after that,
Yeah.
about feeling that I actually, you know what, I am good enough. I am fine just the way I am. And that's a wonderful thing to do for anybody, to let them recognize that their true self, which is obviously your main theme,
Mm,
who they are fundamentally, who they were designed to be, who they were put on this planet to be, is absolutely acceptable. Because if we have these experiences, we form the beliefs, and then we get into the playing a part. You're behaving how you think people want you to behave, or how you should behave. And that's not happiness. That never leads to a happy, content life, because we can only be happy if we're truly being our authentic selves.
And I think, yeah, I love that. I love everything about that for multiple reasons. But I absolutely agree. And I've been your people pleaser. I've been, what I found out from, and again, it's only really come out sort of later in life, as in recently, for me. And I wish I'd have known this sort of 20 years ago, but I didn't. Um, is that because my mum has narcissistic traits, it means that I was viewed as an extension of herself.
Mm,
So I lived the life that I thought she wanted me to have, as opposed to living the life that I wanted to be. Um, which means that I've actually had to question almost practically every part of
mm,
my identity, from personal, psychological, social, spiritual, etc., and realize that actually there were little bits that came in, like I naturally preferred certain things over certain other things. And I
mm,
don't want to give too much away for my later episodes, but I will talk about each and every one of them. But for me, it was only when my mum got more ill and her influence has diminished
mm,
that I've actually suddenly realized that my identity is something very, very different. And I've actually had my own therapy sessions to talk
mm,
about things like that. And again, a lot of what you're talking about is very similar. I mean, obviously we've been talking about it because I've got experience, I've got evidence, I've got factual information from what I've seen and heard. But when I was a child, it was very damaging. And I actually knew, I think I had that self awareness when I was young, because something said to me, you need to get out.
mm.
Something actually said to me, you need to get away. Um, and that was really difficult for me. I actually had to talk to my dad and say, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel safe.
Mm,
I feel smothered. I feel limited. I feel, like I'm on a bungee cord that's way too short. Um, and that's one of the reasons why I went to university,
mm.
if I'm
And a
honest,
lot,
because it, and that's one of the reasons why I was trying so hard academically,
mm,
because that was my route out.
yeah, and it
Because
often
university,
is.
mm.
Mm,
And then when I got to university, I actually didn't really enjoy it that
mm,
much, but at least I was out,
mm,
and that was the kind of the focus, the goal.
mm,
And being dyslexic but having a high IQ meant that actually my academic years were not fun.
mm,
But I had to go through them. I had to go through my GCSEs, my A levels, and get the results I needed. And I just about scraped through, but I didn't care as long as I scraped through. And that's a whole another piece of my identity. But I had it but at the time, I was just like, just got to keep going, just got to keep doing this, and you'll realize you're where you want to be. And then, of course, once I was at university, I never kind of then went back because I got friends and a life elsewhere. But I deliberately went far away rather than local because I didn't want to stay at home.
and
Mm,
that's often the way out. But before you even get to that stage, before you even get to the stage of being able to verbalize something's not right, you realize that you need these people because you're too young to
yeah,
survive on your own. So you
yeah,
kind of have to go with their sense of life, and you have to believe what they're telling you about yourself. So a lot of
yeah,
identity is formed by really the information you're given. And
yeah.
the other really sad thing is that the child thinks it's going to be like this forever
Mm.
because they can't see further down the line and that they'll be independent and out of this situation. And
No.
that's where that feeling of helplessness comes in.
Yeah, the most troubled times I think I had was when I was going through puberty and I was a late bloomer. Um, and unfortunately at the time my mum was going through menopause. So my
Lovely
dad had a
combination.
my dad had a really great time for those sort of few years. I think he was often quite at the pub, but I think he
Mm,
was at the pub more at that point. But I think one of the things that we talked about was looking back on it was if I'd have known now what I knew then, I would have had much different feelings, I think. But we antagonized each other, something
Mm,
chronic,
mm,
proper chronic, because we really wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing, um, we were getting one-upmanship almost from
yeah,
the other person. You
yeah.
know, it wasn't what I would call a
Mm,
healthy parent-child
mm.
relationship. But again, that's probably something I can talk a lot about as well. But so so going back to your work, etc., and obviously the things that you do, you mentioned to me about your, is it 1-to-1 3-month transformational program, isn't it, which is
Mm.
achieving. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, because you said you're
Yeah,
enjoying that at the moment?
I'm really enjoying it, and I feel
Mm,
that, when you think that you've cracked something, like you've brought all the different elements of things that have worked over the years and put them together, and I feel that that's what this is. And another thing I love about hypnosis and hypnotherapy is it's fast. Like, I'm very
mm.
results driven, I think, because of my corporate background.
Corporate, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's where I get satisfaction. I don't want someone to leave me feeling a little bit better. I want to have that fundamental shift in their
Mm,
life. And that's
mm,
where I get my satisfaction. So the 3 month is basically working with me for just that's it, 90 days. And the version of the person that comes out of that program compared to the one that came in is extraordinary,
mm,
because we are shifting all this stuff. What is holding you back? What are those limiting beliefs? How do you need to feel about yourself?
mm.
And so I always start with self-esteem.
Yeah.
That's always the first session. And then we have three of these. They're very in-depth sessions, my hypnotherapy sessions, because of all the, investigation work, if you like, and finding out where this all came
Mm.
from. And then it's weekly coaching calls, because sometimes people can talk themselves out of therapy work.
Yes.
And then they get my personal WhatsApp number. So it's a bit like having a therapist in your pocket. So they don't have to think, oh, I must tell Kate about that next time we meet. It's
Yeah.
literally, I'll just send her a message, and then we can either pick that up now or later. But it's just keeping them going. So it's like all in for 3 months,
Yes.
um, and then you've dealt with all of these issues, and then go live your life. Go live your life as you were always intended to live your life, happy and free and content and full of good self-esteem, and not battling relationship issues, and understanding where these problems have come from. So I love working like that, because I get to know the person very well.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and I like the fact that it's not just dealing with one thing at the edges. It's like, okay, what's going on in your life? What don't you like about it? What is difficult?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's sort that out. And the same, for any age, any person, it's like, sort it out now. The sooner you can get to grips with these issues, the happier your life will be. I mean, when I have worked with people in their 70s, and one lady 82,
Wow.
even 50s, 60s, you think, oh, if only you'd found a way of tackling this earlier. The repeated
Yeah.
patterns that people go through, the lost relationships, the hardships, the difficulties. If you can get to this as soon as you can, it just frees you up.
And what do you think is the biggest barrier that people have in terms of doing this? Because I can think of, probably there are people right now who would say to me, "I want a quick fix,"
Yeah.
and I know that whilst you do get results quickly, that there is also an element of hard work, isn't there, for any of us when we're doing this sort of stuff?
Well, yes
So
and no. I
yeah.
think I think this is another reason why I love hypnotherapy, is that it's
Mm,
so easy.
mm,
Putting in the good suggestion is literally listening to a short audio as you fall asleep. That's not difficult.
no.
We deal with so much. A lot of the issues I deal with, it's one session. Fears, phobias, smoking, vaping, all those things. One session is done. And so you're just in it for that session. when you're working more intensely, if someone's got, broader issues, and we're working over 3 months, the work is having to talk back to these negative thoughts and beliefs,
Mm,
and putting in action the tools I'll give you, and the hacks. So there's a bit more work involved in that, because
mm. Of
you're right, people just want the magic pill.
course I
People
do.
would
Yeah.
much rather take a tablet than really deal with the situation. But I'll go back to my original analogy about the doctor. You can have the sticking plasters, you can have the coping mechanisms, you can have
Mm,
the medication that helps you carry on. But
mm,
unless you're really going to delve in there,
mm,
um, you need to solve it at that level. And I understand why people would be cautious, because they don't want to open up Pandora's box. And I would say always, always work with someone who is going to, put that safe environment around you.
absolutely.
Not going to say, oh, if you're dealing with really traumatic stuff, you can't say, oh, time's up, we'll pick this up next Thursday.
No,
You can't open
no.
something if you're
Mm.
not going to deal with it. So I can understand that reticence, but so make sure you feel safe with someone. Uh, you know,
I absolutely agree with you. I couldn't
mm,
want to overstate that more. Is that, and I think that's why there's so many of us out there in the world, right? Because I think certain people connect with certain
mm,
characters or whatever. But for me, it's about making that person feel safe and feel like they can be, have non-judgmental,
mm,
advice, etc. And that's what I
mm,
would say to any of our listeners is that always make sure that no matter what you're doing, you're doing something that's right for you. If you feel uncomfortable in what the therapist, counselor, hypnotherapist, whatever is asking you to do, then maybe you're not right. Maybe that's not right for you right now. It doesn't mean that you never will be. It just means that it might be, you might need to come back and work out what it is that's uncomfortable about it and what you might need to work on. It's kind of a journey, isn't it? It's that ongoing journey.
and it
Um,
definitely is. And I would say to anybody that there is always something that will help. You might need to try a few things, you might need to speak to a few people, but find out what it is for you. Like
yeah,
anyone who says, this is it, this is the therapy that's going to fix everybody, it's not
it
true.
doesn't. No.
It's what's right for you, as you say, at that moment in time, who is right for you at that moment in time. And, but it's always worth doing.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's those of us who have come through that, haven't we? We've done it ourselves and we've seen the benefit, and we want to help others see the benefit. I guess one of the I think we should wrap it up in a few minutes, if that's okay, because I like
Yeah.
to try and keep it under an hour. But one of the things I was going to ask was, have you had people who just frankly just don't believe in hypnotherapy that have sort of come to your door, or have you had anybody that sort of said, because obviously, as you say, we've talked provisionally before about Paul McKenna and stage stuff. I'm absolutely convinced that I know people who would say that's a load of old codswallop. You
Yes.
know,
I
what would
mean,
you say to those sort of people who think that?
I would say, have talk to me.
Yeah,
I would say just have a chat and
yeah,
understand it, because everything is about curiosity and understanding, isn't it? And of course, if that's all you've seen and
mm.
that's been labeled hypnosis, that's not hypnotherapy, it's hypnosis.
Yes, yes,
If that's all you've seen, then of course that's what you believe. And there's no point entering into this if you're convinced it's not going to work. Then don't go down that avenue
no,
because
no, yeah,
then guess what, it probably won't work. I had one guy come to me once for quitting smoking, and it didn't work, but it transpired he was doing it because he told his partner he would do something to stop smoking. He
uh,
didn't want to stop smoking. So you do want to have to change the issue as well. You can't do this for somebody else. You can desperately
no,
want them to get the help they need, but they have to be the ones who want it. And it's all about explaining how this works, and that hypnosis, it's all it is a deep relaxation similar to meditation,
yeah, Yeah.
But the brain waves it uses means that you can focus. You can cut out everything else and really focus and access your subconscious, which is really important because that stores all the answers. I don't have the answers. The client has
Yeah.
the answers.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and somebody gave me this brilliant description once. I was working online with them. And when we finished, she said, I was very conscious that somebody was at the door, but I had no inclination to go and answer it. And that's pretty much hypnosis.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's a really good way of saying it. Absolutely. I think that's a really good stopping point, if that's okay. But
Absolutely. As you say, we could talk about this
yeah,
for
oh, we
hours and
could, yeah.
hours.
And I think we definitely need to talk about other collaboration. I think because Kate, I've enjoyed it so much. I've learned so much, and I definitely hope that there are people out there that will find this useful as an introduction for both of us. But I also did want to, before we go, is just say that you've very, very kindly given my listeners an offer, haven't you, of a 10% discount, etc., which I'll put in the episode. So they just need to quote Living 10
Mhm.
when they contact you, and they get 10%, which is very generous. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Um, and I appreciate that, and I will definitely be looking to send some people your way because I think that a lot of people can benefit from this. And it's been a really interesting conversation. I definitely would like to talk to you more, but yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for joining me, and for sharing it. I think it's an amazing story. And what I will say to our listeners is that if the episode has sparked something in you, then we'd love to hear about it. And you can connect with me or Kate on our social media platforms and websites. I'll put all the details in the episode description rather than trying to spell it out audibly. But yes, I think from me, until next time, I think stay grounded, stay curious, and keep living authentically. So thanks very much, Kate, and have a great day.
Thank you.